So perfect. So this is a webinar. It's part of the Spring 2021 series of webinars on TEL doctoral topics developed by the DETEL Erasmus Plus project. I'm Layalvo and I'm joined here with Lorena and Victoria, and we are doing this webinar about design-based research in technology-enhanced learning. So what we mainly will learn in this webinar, so you will be familiar with design-based research methodology and including terminology, definitions, and some characteristics. You will be able to understand different categories of research questions, research functions, and research designs. And as well as you will be introduced to DBR phases, analysis, development, and evaluation, and also models for conducting DBR methodology. And also you will be introduced to hierarchical principle of evaluating the learning interventions as well at the end.
Hello, so really nice to see how rich this webinar will be with people from different areas, but all the same as we are all doing research in technology-enhanced learning. So to start, I'm going to present our agenda. So we are going to start presenting some DBR definitions and all the technologies that belong to the same family. We are going to illustrate some examples of research questions, research functions, and research designs, present some DBR models, their phases and characteristics, do an activity in small groups, and then Professor Victoria is going to talk about field studies as evaluation method in DBR. Two possible purposes of DBR research can be identified, and dependent on the purpose of the research, we may distinguish them between development studies and validation studies. In the case of development studies, the purpose of DBR is to develop research-based solutions for complex problems in educational practice. Okay, and in validation studies, the purpose of DBR, or design research, is the development or validation of theory about processes of learning and teaching, for example. However, regardless of the purpose, design research encompasses the systematic study of designing, developing, and evaluating educational interventions. And these interventions can be programs, learning processes, learning environments, teaching learning materials, products, systems, and etc. Researchers have argued that there is a lack of relevant research in the area of education, and there is a need for a research design that addresses problems in real practice. The DBR collective, the design-based research collective, for example, states that educational research is often divorced from the problems and issues of everyday practice, a split that resulted in a credibility gap and creates a need for new research approaches that speak directly to problems of practice and that lead to the development of usable knowledge. So traditional research approaches in education often provide a description of the context and hardly ever emphasize prescriptions that can be useful to tackle real problems in education. Baker says that most educational research describes or evaluates education as it currently is. Some educational research analyzes education as it was. Design research, however, is about education as it could be or even as it should be. So instead of doing more research comparing whether in a certain context method A is better than method B, researchers should aim at developing an optimal solution for the problem in that context. About the terminology, there are a lot of terms relating to design research. Some of them are used as synonyms, but others may vary according to their goals and characteristics. Examples are design-based research. That's the name of this webinar. We also have design research in education, or educational design research. So education here was incorporated in the term to denote the field in question, to avoid confusion with design research from other fields. And in addition to this, we also have design studies, development or developmental research, engineering research, participatory action research, design-based implementation research, design experiments, and some of them may vary according to their goals and characteristics, as I said. Scientific research has different functions. Some of them are understanding something in order to contribute to theory. Others contribute more to the development of policies or help improving practice. In other words, there is a great variation in the possible functions of research and their particular aims. Here we can see different types of research functions and examples of research questions. So, for example, we have this question, this first question. What is the achievement of Chinese grade 8 pupils in mathematics? So the function here is to describe. Then we have what is the achievement in mathematics of Chinese grade 8 pupils as compared to that in certain other countries. Here, the main function is to compare. We have what are the strengths and weaknesses of a certain approach to evaluate. What are the causes of poor performance in mathematics to explain or to predict? And what are the characteristics of an effective teaching and learning strategy aimed at acquiring certain learning outcomes? Here, the main function is to design and develop. Sometimes one question, as for example, the second one, can have different functions. So besides comparing, researchers may also want to evaluate the achievement in maths in each country related to the research. Another example is when designing and developing a teaching learning strategy. So researchers may first want to describe what barriers the students experience, for example, and then evaluate whether the teaching learning strategy that has been developed is effective. So it has different functions. These examples illustrate that usually a research project has a primary research function, but other research functions may be applied to serve the primary research function. If you are writing your research project, you must begin with a research problem, and then you can elaborate your research question, and then and then you are going to decide what the function and the research design. We already talked about research question, research function. So now let's take a look at some examples of research designs and their function. The most common used textbooks on research methodology in social science or in education present and discuss a number of research designs. Usually, each research design can be used for realizing more than one research function. Some examples of research designs in their possible functions are survey, that the function is to describe, to compare, to evaluate. Case studies, that the function is to describe, to compare, to explain. Experiments, to explain or to compare. Ethnography, to describe or to explain. Correlational research, to describe or to compare. Evaluation research, to determine effectiveness of a problem. Action research, to develop or to design and develop a solution to a practical problem. So here again, more than one research design can be applied. You can have a primary research design in a primary research function, but also apply other research designs as a complement. For example, you can apply a survey to evaluate the learning of mathematics. You can design a program through action research, and then you can do an evaluation research to determine if the program developed is effective. Okay. And probably due to its recently emerging status, textbooks do not present and discuss design research. Its function is to design and develop an intervention as a solution to a complex educational problem, or with the purpose to develop or validate theories. So what are the main differences between action research and design research? Because both has the function of designing and developing solutions. Both design research and action research identify real problems and take actions to solve them. Another similarity is that practitioners, such as teachers, are highly involved in the research process. However, design research is distinct from action research in two aspects: the major goal and the roles of researchers and teachers in the research process. First, developing theory to solve authentic problems is one of the major goals in design research, or in DBR. Second, regarding the roles of the participants in design research, researchers usually take the initiative in the research process as both researchers and designers. In action research, however, it is usually the practitioners who initiate the process and to improve their practice, and then the researchers come to facilitate the research process. The focus of this webinar is on design research, or design-based research, DBR. So let's take a look again at the question and its function. So what are the characteristics of an effective teaching and learning strategy aimed at acquiring certain learning outcomes? So the function is to design and develop an intervention as a solution to a complex educational problem, or with the purpose to develop or validate theories. Here we have the structure of the research question that has design research as its research design. So what are the characteristics of an intervention X for the purpose or outcome Y in context Z? And here we have two examples just to illustrate this structure. So what are the characteristics of an intervention for promoting academic research writing? So this is the purpose, which will best support graduates in education in the proposal stage of their research. So here we have the context. Then another example, what are the characteristics of a micro-scale chemistry curriculum materials? So this is the intervention, so that they can contribute to the implementation of effective practical work in chemistry teaching, the purpose outcome, in Tanzania schools. So think of some examples of educational problems from your context and how you can design and develop an intervention as a solution. Remember, interventions can be programs, learning environments, teaching learning materials, products, systems, and etc. You must contextualize the problem and create the research question using this structure. Now we're going to talk about the phases and cycles of DBR. Okay, so like all systematic educational and instructional design processes, this one is cyclical or iterative. Okay, so it incorporates cycles of analysis, design and development of prototype, evaluation and revision activities until the ideal result is achieved. This process can be illustrated in many different ways, depending on the author. So let's see another example. Reeves presented a model that highlights four main phases of design research, or DBR. So we have the first phase, analysis of practical problems by researchers and practitioners in collaboration. Then we have developments of prototype solutions informed by existing design principles and technological innovations. We have iterative cycles of testing and refinement of solutions in practice, and we have reflection to produce theory, design principles, and enhanced solution implementation. These arrows here represent the iterative or cyclical characteristics of the process. Okay? This model was the research design used by Susan McKinney in her thesis, and it has three main phases: analysis, needs and context analysis, design development, and formative evaluation, and then the third phase, semi-summative evaluation. Each phase consisted of multiple cycles of activities. So in the first phase, in this first cycle, we have literature review and concept validation. Then site visits were carried out. Then we have the development of the prototype and the final evaluation and the query. This last cycle here can be interpreted as the reflection box from Rivi's model, okay? In total, 8 cycles were conducted, 2 in the first phase, 4 in the second phase, and 2 in the third one, with the number of participants varying in each cycle. Okay, so here we had about 20, then we had 40, 50, I think, and then about 60, and so on. And each cycle lasted about 6 months. Based on their survey and analysis of existing models and frameworks for design-based research, McKinney and Rivis created this generic model for conducting design research in education. This model shows the core elements of a flexible process that feature the 3 main stages. So the first one, analysis and exploration, then design and construction, evaluation, reflection, and these 3 phases takes place in interaction with implementation and spread. It also provides the dual outputs of intervention and theoretical understanding. These are just some examples of models for conducting DBR. There are many other ones according to different authors. Authors may vary in details of how they picture design research, but they all agree that design research has 3 main phases. Okay, so we have the preliminary research, the development or prototyping phase, and the assessment phase. The preliminary research consists of needs and context analysis and review of the literature and of projects addressing questions that are similar to the ones in your study. Development and also the development of a conceptual, of a theoretical framework. Then the second phase, prototypes are going to be tried out and revised on the basis of formative evaluations, and it aims at improving and refining the intervention. In the assessment phase, semi-summative evaluation is carried out to conclude whether the solution or intervention meets the predetermined specifications and whether it is effective and valid. And throughout all these activities, the researcher or the research team will do systematic reflection and documentation to produce the theories as the scientific results of the research, besides the intervention that is more practical. Design research authors also agree on a number of characteristics represented in this type of research. Here are some of them. So they are iterative because the research incorporates cycles of analysis, design and development, evaluation, and revision, as demonstrated in the processes presented before. They are interventionist because the research aims at designing an intervention in a real-world setting. They try to positively impact practice as I said before, these interventions include educational products, as for example, learning materials or a game, processes, programs like workshops to support teachers or policies, okay? And its intention is to make a real change on the ground. They are also collaborative because the research involves active participation and collaboration among practitioners and researchers in the different stages and activities of the research, because the intervention needs to be relevant and practical for the educational context. And this collaboration increases the probability for a successful implementation. They are process-oriented because its focus is on understanding and improving interventions. The products of design-based research are shaped by participants, the literature, and especially field testing. So these interventions are adjusted based on the empirical data, which are collected in real-world settings during the process. Okay? They are also utility-oriented because the merit of a design is measured by its practical use in real contexts, if they are really useful in real contexts. They are theory-oriented because scientific understanding is used to frame not only the research, but also to shape the design of the intervention of the solution to the real problem. And the results also contribute to theoretical understanding. These are some characteristics. Now let's focus on this model by McKinney and Reeves. There are no one-size-fits-all steps for tackling different challenges in the context of education. There are, however, processes and activities which are most often useful. I'm going to present you a repertoire, okay, so that you can select and use the most fitting approaches for your study. In the first phase, we have analysis and exploration. So which activity may I develop in this phase? The main goal of analysis is problem definition. Okay, so through contextual analysis and needs assessment, as well as literature review, initial perception of the problem are refined and causes for the problem are explained. So 3 main activities are undertaken to conduct analysis: initial orientation, literature review, and field-based investigation. The central question during initial orientation is, what do we want to know? So what do we want to know about the problem? What do we want to know about the context? What do we want to know about stakeholders' needs and wishes? Okay. The goal of literature review is not to find an answer to the question, what should I do to solve this problem, but to understand how others have experienced similar problems and how these problems were addressed. So it can provide ideas that can help you shape data collection, and it can be used to identify frameworks to data analysis. Okay. During field investigation, data are collected to describe the setting, its actors, mechanisms, and other relevant factors. It is necessary to plan for conducting the research activities, since they will be conducted in authentic settings, okay? And then data is collected to help understanding the problem and its causes. Here we have exploration. The main goal of exploration is to seek out and learn from how others have viewed and solved similar problems. So exploration is often conducted through site visits. It is important to get to know the people involved, to get information from the site. We also have professional meetings like conferences where you can meet people and learn about their work, and they can also learn about yours. And networking, be in contact with other people who might be useful to your research. Okay. So these are some activities that can be developed in the first phase. Now let's take a look at design and construction. So during design, potential solutions are explored by generating ideas, considering them, and finally checking the potential viability of those ones that seem the most promising. Okay. After potential solutions have been explored and selecting for mapping, it is often useful to revisit, elaborate, and refine the design requirements and design propositions. So the design requirements give more guidance on what is to be accomplished in a specific setting, while the design propositions inform how that can be done and why. Okay. Once a limited number of options have been identified, potential solutions are gradually mapped from a skeleton design to detailed specifications. And here in this phase, you have only ideas, abstract ideas. They are only planned, okay? After solutions are designed, the specific components of the actual intervention are constructed through a process called prototyping. So while it may be possible to build a complete intervention all at once, educational design research or design-based research, DBR, most often involves creating successive approximations of the desired interventions. These successive approximations are commonly referred to as prototypes. Okay? The design ideas mentioned in the design phase are not considered prototypes because they represent the planned solution. Okay? We use the term prototype to describe various draft versions of the constructed solution. So prototype can be, for example, paper-based, or you can create the interface of a software in PowerPoint, for example. Okay. And after creating the initial prototypes, they are evaluated, and this evaluation concludes with revision recommendations. So what to add, what to remove, what to alter. It is a more formative assessment. And then we have the third phase, evaluation and reflection. So during the evaluation and reflection phase, design and prototype solutions are empirically tested, and the findings are reflected upon with the aim of refining the theory, the theoretical understanding about how, and why intervention features work. So here we have a more semi-summative or summative evaluation. Evaluation follows an empirical cycle consisting of some steps. So in the planning phase, the goal is to establish focus, frame questions, select strategies, determine methods, document plan. In the field work, instruments are prepared, participants are engaged, data collected. In the mini-making, it aims at analyzing data, considering findings, and reporting the study. Okay. In reflection, can take place organically or through more structured techniques. The term organic reflection refers to a kind of intended contemplation, the kind of reflection that takes place during the shower or during a commute to work. And it takes place during times when there is very little agenda. So when the mind is relatively free to wander and make its own connections between ideas. On the other hand, some authors have developed specific techniques to structure reflection. There is a process, for example, that consists of three main phases. We have the preparation that consists of collecting the relevant facts or observations to be considered. Image forming that involves selection and synthesis of those facts and observation. And conclusion drawing that use the results from the first two steps to determine the next activities. Okay, so these are some activities that can be developed in each phase.